This is a tarot reading for the Chinese New Year, for the entire year of the dragon, which starts on February the 10th. Now, it's the lunar New Year, so it isn't exactly a year, but it lasts around a year. And February the 10th is quite late, so the date shifts every year. But it's somewhere around the end of January, beginning of February always. If you're unsure of what Chinese zodiac sign you are, if you look in my notes, there's a crib there which lets you know. And it's based on the year that you were born, rather than the month that you were born in. But if you're born at the end of the year, it's a little bit more complicated, and you'd need to look it up. So this is a reading for the year of the dragon at the sign of the horse, and it's for the whole of the year of the dragon. So horses, your year of the dragon looks to be a year, I suppose, like any other year, whereby there's ups and downs. I think overall it's a good year. Now, I do need to say to you that this is only tapping into energies. You have free will, so it's not a fortune. I'm not fortune telling here. You look at that central card, the Three of Wands. That suggests that you've not only planned things, but you're now considering acting. And I see that very positively, because you look just above it, you have the Hanged Man, which suggests that you've been hanging around waiting for something to happen. So this is probably a very positive card, this Three of Wands. In the past, we have the energy of the Emperor. That suggests that you certainly were powerful, maybe even a leader, looked up to by others. But maybe that's gone now, and maybe that's why it's in that position. Your current energy is the Knight of Cups, the Knight of Love. A wonderful, wonderful knight. Wears his heart on his sleeve, but could be accused of being a fool for love. Is this reading about love? Well, I don't see so many indications of that, but I need to keep an open mind to it. In the future, we have the energy of the moon, fear of the unknown. Now, I guess we're all fearful of the unknown at the moment. There's so much that's unknown. So I can understand that. I don't necessarily see it as negative. The energy that leads to the outcome is this Hanged Man, you hanging around waiting for something to happen. And I think many of us are in that sort of position. We can't fully read what's going on in the world and are waiting for some sort of signal or information before we do more. The next energy which changes the outcome is the Five of Swords, which is an energy of deception. And I know you're screaming, oh no, not more deception. And I can understand that, and we'll look at it in greater detail. But the outcome is the King of Pentacles. A king who has an understanding of wealth, who knows wealth, a sophisticated investor maybe. So not a bad outcome, I'd say. Now there's no doubt that over recent years we've all been through so much trauma. trauma that has made many of us think, how must we change? How must we change our lives? And so having this card, which is the Three of Wands, whereby you're planning something probably quite radical, something very different in your life, I see not only as a natural reaction, but probably a very good response to all that's happening. Of course, if you go off in the wrong direction, then it's perhaps not the right thing to do, but I don't have any indication of that. No, in fact, I feel it is absolutely the right thing to be doing. And this is something that runs throughout the entire reading, and I need to recognise that as I look at the other energies. Now, I think many of us look to the past as a golden age, maybe with rose-tinted spectacles, and possibly this is what you're doing here. But I think maybe that not only is it somewhat objective that the past was better than the current, but also I think you probably did have power. You maybe were a leader. You maybe were a little conservative, but you were somebody sure of yourself, knew what you were doing, where you were going. And now that seems to have fallen away. You could take decisions, and you could be firm in your decisions. And that firmness all seems to have gone, and it's because last year a new paradigm was created, a major change. And most of us are still struggling to understand exactly what this new paradigm's about. But it certainly isn't about abuse of power. Not suggesting that you did, but it might be relevant. And if the old paradigm was about power, but also about greed, manipulation, lies, censorship, then the new paradigm is one of love, of understanding, of working together, compassion. And that is embodied in your current energy. So it feels like you've made exactly the right move. However, if the previous paradigm and your previous feeling was one of power and knowing what you're doing, not being exploited by anyone, this Knight of Cups is a knight who's prone to being a fool for love, being manipulated by others because he wears his heart on his sleeve. He's an easy target, even though the rendering shows a female knight. And this vulnerability is something that the universe seems to be saying to us we need to encourage, to put down our barriers, because the universe does have great blessings for us if only we can stop putting up barriers to them. So I do see this as fairly positive, but of course there is the warning that you do get taken for a ride a little. The future, we have the Moon card, fear of the unknown. Normally I'd be a little bit alarmed or concerned at this card, but I think we're all experiencing a fear of change, a fear of the unknown. And let's face it, there's so much fear porn around. We're being encouraged to be fearful. And of course fear leads to tribalism and hatred, and there seems to have been an explosion of that. So, it's not a good energy to have. But I suspect it's somewhat natural. It's something for you to overcome, because it's only fear of the unknown. You don't know it's going to happen. And I mean, of course, I'm racked with fear also, but the way to deal with it is to say, what's the worst thing that can happen? And once you've thought that through, then you're no longer fearful. So it is fear of the unknown. It's not something that you categorically know that is happening. The energy that leads to the outcome is the energy of the Hanged Man, which is in sharp contrast to the overall theme about you action planning, or maybe it isn't. You see, you're hanging around looking to see the lie of the land. It might have been forced upon you, but I suspect it hasn't. You're trying to work things out in your head before acting, which of course that Three of Wands is about planning, and they're planning a course of action. So maybe this isn't a bad thing. And this leads to the outcome, and I see the outcome as a positive outcome. It's just that fear later on that I see somewhat negative. No, maybe this is the right thing to be doing. Not showing your hand until you're sure. Yeah, maybe it's a good card, this. And what would change the outcome is the energy of deception. And yeah, you're crying out, not more deception. Don't you think we've been through enough? And yes, we have. And that's what this new paradigm is about, sweeping it all away. But there's still remnants. In fact, there's a lot of deception, major deception still going on in the world. I mean, I don't know about you, but, you know, it seems to me now, whenever I try and buy something, anything, the potential for deception is just grown exponentially. So few things that we need now can we buy honestly. Well, not without great trouble, you know. So there is major deception going on. I've got a feeling this is about financial investments. And I talked about fear porn earlier, and I'm certain this fear porn is to panic people into taking out investments that maybe aren't that wise. Now, I'm not giving financial advice, for goodness sake, but I do think this might be a financial deception. And what you're being told to do is not to dwell on it, to move on. This would change the outcome, and that's why I'm saying don't dwell on it. So even if you do have some sort of financial deception, just move on from it, because I think you're on the right path, horses. So yes, I am now seeing this King of Pentacles as a good outcome. Because he's somebody who's financially sophisticated, somebody who knows what they're doing. And this fits in with the action planning. You've been thinking about it, planning what to do with your money. I say money, will we even have money by the end of this year? With CDCs, it'll be nothing like what most of us consider to be money. Yeah, you're thinking about wealth and what to do with your wealth and how to use it wisely. And that hanging around is probably you waiting to see the lie of the land. You know, with CDCs, where should we invest and how should we invest? Clearly those in the know absolutely what to do, and that's the point, isn't it, of these changes. That a select few have inside knowledge on the way the markets will go and the way things will change, but to the small investor, we cannot fathom it, can we? So yeah, and you know, if you have been through some sort of a deception, fraud, call it what you will. This is a king who's learned by their mistakes from experience, but they're now so much wiser as a result. Yeah, I'm seeing it all in a different light now. I think we need a little bit of clarification before I go on too far. And what are you fearful of? And this is probably outside this year even, but what are you fearful of? Well, you're fearful of the past. You're fearful of abrupt endings. And you're fearful of getting depressed over it. Let's look at each individually. So what are you fearful of? Well, you're fearful of the unknown. But I think you're assessing the unknown through past experience. And it could be going back some time. It might even be past experience with people you know. Past experience even with a loved one. Doesn't have to be. But I think you've been burned once or twice. And we probably are talking of finances here. And I think the action that you choose is to do with finances. It's quite radical. And you're thinking to yourself, have I done the right thing? The last time I did something quite radical, it all went very wrong. And I'm pretty certain that the universe is encouraging you to think radically and do radical things. But I can't be 100% certain of that. Now the next card of clarification is death, a sudden and bitter ending. Given the last card was about the past, I suspect that in the past you experienced a bitter ending to some investments. And it's that that's concerning you. That when last time you did something really radical, which I do believe you're considering, it all went horribly wrong. So having decided to do something really radical, you're now worried about it. But as I say, you're sophisticated. I think you know what you're doing. So these are only fears. Yeah, they're only fears. Now, following on this line of thought about what happened in the past, and maybe I'm getting this wrong. So just take the energies I'm talking about. But we have the energy of depression. So it's my feeling that in the past, and it could be a long way in the past, you did something quite radical, and I think it's about investments, but it doesn't have to be. You did something quite radical and it all went wrong. Everything seemed to collapse around you. And it led you into a state of depression. And you're seeking to avoid that. And that's quite natural. But if you remember, I talked about paradigms and everything changing. I honestly get the impression you've learnt from these mistakes. And instead of putting up boundaries, you're much better able to deal with them now. And in any case, this is only fear of this. It's not an actuality. So it's about overcoming your fears, because if you believe something will happen, it will happen. So it's okay to have fears and fleeting fears, but let them be fleeting. Well, we can summarise for you, horses. Horses, I think in this year of the dragon, you enter it feeling a loss of power. You know that things have changed massively, but you're not entirely certain how they've changed. But you feel that maybe you had power, maybe you had authority, but you feel that this is gone. And I think you're responding in a very good way. You're opening up your heart to love. You're opening up your heart to many things. But you are hanging around to see the lie of the land before you act. But the actions that you're considering are quite radical actions. But you are really giving it a great deal of thought. You really are. Now, I think it's all about wealth and investments. Because the outcome is you as a sort of sophisticated investor. Someone with great experience who've seen it all before. So I think these are investments that you're thinking about. And one of the things that leads to this sophistication is your experience. But there could be yet another deception, maybe of a financial nature. And you're being told, just don't dwell on it. Don't dwell on it. Move on, If you're doing some quite radical things, spread your investments for goodness sake. But if one goes wrong, and the others do well, just say, so what, But I think you are going to, probably after this year, be gripped by fear of the unknown, fear of what you've done. And it does seem, and it might not be investments, but let's go with the investment thing. It's something that is close to what you've done before. And it went horribly wrong. Maybe you lost all your money if we're talking of investments. But it was sudden, it was abrupt. It wasn't what you were expecting at all. And it left you very depressed. But horses, I'm certain you've learned from this. And all I can say is that, yeah, it's fine to worry. We're all worried. The world's so uncertain now. It's fine to worry. But don't dwell on it. Just move on.